everyone, and welcome to the ARM Software Developer Breakdown. My name is Robert Wolf, and in this video, we're going to be meeting with Peter Robinson from Red Hat, who's going to talk to us about PARSEC, otherwise known as the platform abstraction for security. He's also going to tell us about how he integrated PARSEC into Fedora, as well as the many things that he'll be doing with PARSEC and Fedora in the near future. All right, well, hello, Peter. I'm glad to have you on the show. Thank you very much for doing this with us. How are you doing today?
Very well, thanks, Robert. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very excited to hear about PARSEC and all the cool stuff that you've been doing with PARSEC on Fedora. So before we dive into that, though, it'd be very nice if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself, as well as the things that you do with Red Hat.
I'm Peter Robinson. I'm the lead architect for IoT and Device Edge for the Linux platform layer. So that covers RHEL and Fedora and the sort of Linux operating system level within Red Hat. And my role is many and varied. I work within Red Hat and the Fedora community for Fedora IoT, which is the upstream Linux Fedora edition focused on IoT and Device Edge, and also for our RHEL for Edge product, which was recently announced, and we're working towards the first release there. But also I work with the upstream ecosystem for IoT and standardization. So I work extensively with ARM across a number of initiatives, such as PARSEC. I work with the wider ARM ecosystem and partner network, as well as other initiatives across, the open source ecosystem and IoT as a whole.
So, Peter, very nice to get to know you. I mean, of course, we've known each other for quite a while now, so more so introducing you to the viewers. But I think now let's dive right into PARSEC and the things that you've done with PARSEC and Fedora. So if you wouldn't mind kind of walking us through the process, or the process that you've gone through with getting PARSEC integrated into Fedora.
Yeah, so the PARSEC process with ARM actually began just after TechCon a year ago, when PARSEC and Project Cassini was announced. I forget whether it was ARM reached out to me or I reached out to ARM about the initiative, but we sort of started discussing it and had a few meetings about it. Part of the Edge team works on security, because obviously security is a huge focus for IoT and Device Edge. And the concepts behind PARSEC at the time were very, very prototype. They knew where they wanted to go, but a lot of the API and feature set wasn't completely sort of settled beyond the original Docker container demo that was done at TechCon last year. And so myself and Patrick Oitovic, who's my security lead within IoT and Device Edge at Red Hat, sat down over a number of weeks with the PARSEC team and reviewed the standard and how it would work in a general distribution situation. We evolved that and, worked out a few, queries and bits and pieces we had around that. And then we came up with the idea that Fedora being the upstream for RHEL, we had customers that were interested in a bunch of the functionality around PARSEC and some of the promises that it provided around, the ability to deal with secrets and secure bits and pieces within an OS context in a hardware abstraction or a hardware independent way. And so, things like that started to evolve. And Fedora being the upstream of RHEL, that's where we wanted to prototype it. We can iterate very quickly there. We can get things upstream. We can get things updated and fixes pushed out very quickly. And it's a really good test bed and sounding bed to get it out to the wider community for testing. And so about 6 months ago, as we were coming into the Fedora 33 planning, we decided that we would feature it there. I worked with the PARSEC team so that I could get it packaged up into Fedora so that it was easily consumable. And the demo that we came up with was basically the ability to be able to store VPN and Wi-Fi credentials, such as like a Wireshark connection within the secure elements, so a TPM2 or a PKCS11 interface on a number of pieces of different hardware, showing that it can be done in a single way and a relatively straightforward way. And so Patrick from my team wrote a dbus secrets interface, which is what Network Manager uses to retrieve the credentials from the system so as to be able to bring up a VPN connection. And often cases at the moment, if you look at where Network Manager stores these secrets, it's just in Etsy. And that's perfectly fine in a data center or a single user laptop where you know who has access to that device. And in the case of a data center, you have the security of 4 walls and access control lists and sysadmins that are audited. So that's great. But as soon as you take away that security and go and put a device on a light post, such as a security camera or devices out in the field where you may not have direct access to that, the ability to be able to store the credentials required on a running system, a lot of these systems should have their file systems encrypted, so the bits at rest on disks aren't recoverable. But if a device is compromised and it's still running, you can still get, the secrets and what have you out of Etsy or off the file system to recover it. And a lot of companies aren't comfortable with, the fact that even though the VPN for their IoT devices will be sort of into specific parts of their network and closely controlled, they're still not comfortable with the fact that, these sort of things may be recoverable. And so by being able to store them in the TPM or the secure part of the hardware in a non-recoverable manner is a critical part for IoT. And so in Fedora 33, we've got that initial implementation done, and that will be featured as part of Fedora IoT 33, but it will be generally consumable in Fedora. And we're already doing work to expand it so that if you've got a known desktop which has credentials and things like that, that it will integrate graphically into that environment as well. And it's not just limited to obviously network credentials, but we'll be looking at how we can expand both the PARSEC integration, but also potentially the PARSEC dbus integration with other things like IoT services, different areas of the stack to make it generally usable from a general IoT distribution point of view. But obviously developers will have access to the various different library interfaces, Rust, Golang, C, when they become stable, to be able to use them from a development point of view to directly integrate their apps.
All right, Peter, thank you. That was definitely a lot of information, and I'll make sure that we include any sort of mentions of resources in the description below. But you did seem to touch mostly on Fedora and the stability of PARSEC in Fedora. What could you say about integrating this into, or what would you say to enterprise customers, people who are using RHEL? Is there any sort of plans for moving this into RHEL at some point?
Yeah, so thanks, Robert. As I mentioned, Fedora is a proving ground for RHEL. The intention is that it goes upstream into Fedora first, and we make sure it's stable and it's usable and that all the pieces are in place. Because, RHEL is a long-term support distribution. The standard RHEL release cycle the standard RHEL support cycle is 10 years with an option of another 3. Once it goes into RHEL, we want to know that it's stable and it's going to be good for that period of time. So the intention is to review it after it's been in Fedora for a little while, make sure all the APIs are stable, make sure it's ready to go, make sure it does all the things that customers want it to do, and then probably at some point in the 8 cycle, maybe 8.4, possibly 8.5. I'm not exactly sure yet, because we'll need to have a look at some of the data on Fedora and the use cases there. We're looking to get it into RHEL as a tech preview as part of the new app stream, so that customers can start to play with it there. And PARSEC, while it's was announced a year ago, it's still a relatively young project, and there's still some pieces there that are still stabilizing. And Patrick and myself, as part of the review process with the PARSEC team, identified some improvements there, and it'll be good to get it out into Fedora where people can give it a really good look at and check it out, and make sure things are working in the way that it's expected. I think people will be excited about it, and once we know that it's on its way to being stable, we're definitely looking at it as a possibility for a RHEL tech preview.
All right. Well, Peter, this is awesome. Very, very happy to see both the things that have already happened and looking forward at what is to come around PARSEC and the amazing work that you're doing with Red Hat and on Fedora. But moving forward, maybe people will want to get a hold of you or find out the stuff that they can do with you or collaborate with around Fedora IoT and the many things that you're working on. So maybe you could tell us some of the places where people might be able to find you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. People can find me on Twitter at nullroots. That's a reference to my old networking background. And I often engage with people there about a number of the innovative things we're doing in Fedora IoT around device edge and things like that. Plus all the usual Fedora mailing lists and processes. I'm fairly easily found on a lot of mailing lists and places like that. And PB Robinson on Freenode for IRC.
Okay, so there you go. There you have it. All of the information you need from Peter. Go find him on Twitter. And Peter, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate having you and having you share all of the cool stuff that's going on around PARSEC and Fedora.
Thanks, Robert. Fun as always.
Well, there you have it. That's the summary of PARSEC and Fedora. Thank you very much, Peter Robinson, for joining us to talk to us about all the cool stuff that you're up to. Every single thing that we talked about today, all the resources that may have been mentioned, will be, of course, provided in the description below. Don't forget to check that out. Don't forget to like and subscribe to ARM Software Developers YouTube channel. We look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.